He's Charles Robinson. He's Frank Schwab. I'm Jason Fitz. It's Inside Coverage, where we break down the where, the high, the when, the wow, everything you need to know about the NFL every single episode. And guys, usually we're coming in here and there's at least a storyline of hope or some way that I can polish this thing up and make fans feel good about a Thursday night football. But as we record right now, I watched a game last night for Thursday night that I thought, am I the only savage that's actually watching this? Like, you want to talk ugly. Watching the Broncos absolutely demolish the Saints, C-Rob, makes me wonder what exactly is going on in New Orleans.
Well, I mean, you got quarterback problems, an aging roster, right? No Sean Payton, which I think that's the hole that's been there, ever since Sean left. No offense to Dennis Allen, but we've seen Dennis Allen as a head coach. It's a multitude of things that are wrong in New Orleans. And frankly, I think once Carr went down, you're sitting there and you're staring at that roster, and Carr was playing at a fairly high level when he went down. You knew this was a team that was going to run into a bit of a wall. Now, Denver, I'll say this for Denver. I know Denver's 4-3, right? But the one quality win, I think, out of those 4 games you can probably look at is Tampa Bay. But I think when you look at what Denver was able to do against the Saints, they were able to run the football. I think they were for 225 yards, right? Now, Bo Nix was part of that. But the way Javonte Williams ran, I think you could kind of see the tone that was set by Denver early in that game. And it's not like, rookie quarterback Bo Nix for the Broncos. He didn't have I wouldn't say it was a great game. It was adequate, right? It was like an adequate game, but the Saints are just flat. Everything about this team feels like it sort of went down the drain once Derek Carr went down with the oblique injury. And the one thing I'll leave you with Denver before I kick it back to you guys is when I went through there in training camp and I was talking to Sean Payton. I think I can reveal this now. I'm pretty certain I wasn't supposed to reveal it, but I think I can reveal it now. Vegas had him at the win total. I think when I went through, the win total for the Broncos was 5.5. And Sean Payton said, the next time I win fewer than 6 games will be the first bleeping time in my career that I win fewer than 6 games. Like, I think he was genuinely pissed off that people were looking at the Broncos and, as just a dead team, a 5-win team in the NFL. He didn't see that. They're at 4-3 now. And I think when you look at the remainder of the schedule, you can see them getting to 9 wins pretty easily, solidly. 9, maybe 10. So not impossible that this Broncos team with that schedule could be a 10-win playoff team.
No, that's Sean Payton, man. I looked at this roster. I did the preview. I had them ranked really low, and I did not dabble on that under win total because I'm like, it's Sean Payton. He's going to pull out some wins that he has no business pulling out. Like, he's a great coach. He's probably a Hall of Fame coach, especially if this time in Denver goes well. I think it reflects well on him. The fact that the Saints have kind of collapsed without him honestly reflects pretty well on him as a coach. So, yeah, they play the Carolina Panthers next. They're going to be 5-3. Like, I don't think this Broncos team is great, but wins are wins. Anything he did last night was kind of, to me, viewed under the lens of, well, it's the Saints. And the injuries don't account for everything with the Saints right now. That defense has just given up, it looks like. The holes that Javonte was running through were ridiculous. And
yeah,
it's like, okay, they got Pete Werner's out with injury. Like, well, everybody's got a Pete Werner out. Like, that's not the reason you're just getting gashed by the Buccaneers, getting gashed by the Broncos. I was honestly surprised. We're taping on Friday morning. I was surprised we didn't lead this off with, well, Dennis Allen got fired. Because they've just looked so bad the last 5 weeks. He really hasn't done anything, into his 3rd season now. And you lose at home to Sean Payton like that. I can't imagine ownership is happy today, even if they haven't made a move yet. And who knows? The day is young. Let's put it that way. Looking, and I know the stat comes up a lot, but my goodness, they are $97 million over the 2025 cap. Now, I get it. Like, things could be moved around, blah, 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 blah. But
no,
if you fire Dennis Allen, who you're selling the next coach on what? Well, it's going to be 2 years before we dig out of the salary cap. We don't have a quarterback, and we really are kind of an aging team. Our 3 best players on defense, except for Marshawn Lattimore, they're all in their mid-30s by now. Like, there's just nothing to sell a new coach right now. It's
Frank,
a bad situation.
With that cap situation, I think they're trade deadline sellers, right? November 5th is the trade deadline.
Have to be, right?
I think you have to look at the Saints roster and go, okay, this kind of a cap hole they have in 2025, it's not the simplistic, oh, we have a big quarterback deal, we can redo that. We can, add some dead years, push the money back. It's not the type of money they have to restructure. It's not exceedingly simple, which means they're going to have to tear down that roster, I think, in some respects. I think that starts at the trade deadline. If anyone's interested in pieces that they have there, as you said, there's a few solid defenders on the wrong side of 30 that could probably be had cheaply. I think this will probably be Dennis Allen's last season. They'll be looking for, I think it'll ultimately be sort of a gut rehab situation. They have to figure out what they want to do with Derek Carr. That contract's not really easy to get rid of. And I think the rest of the season, or at least in the next few games, you're trying to figure out what Spencer Rattler is. You said they don't have a quarterback. I think they have to find out whether or not they have a quarterback. But the NFC South is not at this stage. And remember, historically, the NFC South has been soft. It is not there for them to be had. Tampa Bay is not an illegitimate team.
Right.
Atlanta is not an illegitimate team. This is obviously
the Panthers are, though.
Yeah,
Panthers are. They might get a win or two every year at least. So the Panthers.
I do think this becomes interesting to me, though, guys, because for years, every fan base that has said the salary cap is fake uses New Orleans as an example. They're always in salary cap hell and they get out of it. But when they don't get out of it, like this is robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's like using a credit card to pay a credit card. You can get away with it while you're trying to get your bills paid for a month or two, but eventually you're going to have to pay the rest of this bill. And it feels like that's what's finally happening for New Orleans whenever this rebuild starts. Like they're just going to have to look at it and say, hey, it's rip-apart time, and that's what they've been delaying the inevitable for. The problem is they didn't win enough to justify the rip-apart they're going to have to go through right now. Like it's one thing if you win a Super Bowl and you're like, sorry, guys, we're going to be in cap hell. Or if you're even in massive Super Bowl contention year in and year out, you can justify it to the fan base. Hey, we did this because we thought we had a real shot at winning the damn thing. So every year we put ourselves in this situation. Well, they weren't in that situation. They aren't in that situation. And now they're about to be in a rebuild situation. Like I think when you look at the next 5 years and you look at New Orleans, I'm not sure there are many teams that are in the same category of absolutely screwed as the Saints are.
Yeah, they're in bad shape. By the way, who will get traded? Like I assume Kamara, they're going to try to shop him if they go sell mode. And for some reason, the Saints always resist this idea that they need to tear down. Like they're like, no, we'll put it off another year. So I don't even know that they really realize they need to tear this down. But Kamara, Demario Davis, I guess. I don't know that they'd trade Cam Jordan. Like I guess they would at some point, but he's kind of a franchise icon. Tyrann Mathieu, there's not a lot of guys that they're going to get anything back for, really.
That's true, but I mean, you're not looking for if you're going and you're calling the Saints, you're not looking for like a starting quality elite level player. You're looking for a piece, right? You're looking for a solid veteran body who can come in and add to your depth chart. If it's, I don't think Alvin Kamara gets moved, but maybe because he's got some versatility. And you're sitting there saying, well, we can take some snaps off of our running back rotation. He can be a limited use player for us. I think some of these questions too, though, are how much of the salary is New Orleans willing to pay the remainder of the season? Like that's something that came up in the Davante Adams trade with the Jets and the Raiders. It was, I think the Jets were having issues, the Raiders were having issues because it was like most teams were staring at them going, we're not giving you that price tag unless you pay most of the money that's remaining on that contract this year. And they didn't want to do that. Luckily, the Jets got desperate and they had his buddy, Aaron Rodgers, who wanted him. And that ultimately, brought it together financially in a way that the Raiders are like, sweet, we don't have to pay anything. We get the pick we ultimately want. Maybe we end up getting a second round pick out of this. The Saints won't be in that kind of a situation. But again, I think it is a team that, particularly with those defensive players, there's like 2 or 3 solid defensive players that I think down the stretch, if some contenders are saying, let's get a rental, go here, kick a 4th round pick, a 5th round pick for a player this magnitude. And especially if a team's willing to pay some of that salary that's remaining, that's going to be really helpful for the Saints.
Let me ask you from the other side of it, because you mentioned the Broncos could win 9 or 10 games and the Broncos could be a playoff team. Are the Broncos actually a good football team? Because I think most of us had moderate expectations, and maybe it doesn't matter. They're winning football games. But if you're looking short-term, long-term, like I can't figure out how good how much I can trust the Broncos offense. Their defense, great. How much can I trust their offense? Is Bo Nix really the answer? Like, the Broncos are winning games, so nobody's really complaining about a first-round pick being spent on Bo Nix, but none of this really looks great for Bo Nix. I can't figure out how to adjust my mindset around whether the Broncos, C-Rob, are actually a good football team.
I don't look.
That was that pause. They're not good.
Listen, again, you look at the 4 wins. I'm the first one what did I say? To open up the show, look at the 4 wins. The one quality win, I think, is the win over Tampa Bay.
I'll say the Jets loss is not bad. Like, you would say, okay, that's quality because it's on the road, and the Jets aren't a terrible team or anything. So yeah, it's not total empty calories here.
Yeah, I mean, I just to me, the way that I look at the Broncos is Sean Payton went in there at the lowest of lows, right? They offloaded Russell Wilson, right? So you're still processing through the money, the Russell Wilson, moving on from Russell Wilson, trying to get the dead cap money off the books, right? You're rotating over the roster into some younger players, particularly on offense, that Sean Payton prefers. So I think you're in the middle of it's like remodeling a house. If you want to go in right in the middle of it and look around and go, yeah, okay, I can kind of see the walls. I can kind of see what you're doing here, but geez, I'm standing in the bathroom and I can see through 7 different rooms because there's no drywall up. I mean, that's what it's going to look like. That's what, so you're like, that's where the Broncos are. They're in the midst of the restructuring. And I think there's some culture to it too. I think the fact that if Sean Payton can get them to double-digit wins, that's a pretty big boost inside that building. So, I don't think they're necessarily a good team right now, but I think they are adequate and they're in the midst of a rebuild that is at least pointed in the right direction. And as far as Bo Nix goes, if Sean Payton's happy with him, okay. Like my assessment of him really doesn't matter. And I said before, and I think it was last week when we talked about the back and forth, that the animated exchange they had, I think he is the type of quarterback that can survive with Sean Payton, which is important. He can give it back to him when he has to and draw a line. And I think Sean likes that. And, so maybe he won't be an all-world player, but he doesn't necessarily have to be an all-world player for them to ultimately be a good team as long as the build goes the way that it's supposed to the next few seasons.
Yeah, I've kept saying about Bo Nix, he's going to be fine. Like, he's kind of having a normal rookie year. Like, he's not Jaden Daniels. He's not Caleb Williams. Not many guys are. Like, CJ
Stroud warped. CJ Stroud warped.
He killed everybody.
Completely warped how we look at rookie quarterbacks.
Right. And these 2 guys this year are doing the same thing because this is normal. Like, he's going to have some games where he has 60 yards passing against the Jets.
Drake Maye stepped in and threw 3. I know he had 3 turnovers, but he threw 3 touchdown passes. You're like, what's going on, man? Like, this is a terrible team. Yeah, it's a good quarterback class.
I've always been defensive of Nick, saying he's fine. What are your expectations of him? Is he going to be an MVP guy? No, he's going to be, who he is? You know what kind of career he's going to have? He's going to have a Derek Carr type of career where he's maybe 1 year sniffs MVP conversation, but mostly he's just kind of there. And in the right situation, he can win some games.
Fitz is sitting there in the quarterback abyss, and he's angry anybody else has a quarterback. He's
No, this all comes back to Bo Nix. Look, everything you said, Frank, is fine. If he's fine, he's fine. You're in the same division as Patrick Mahomes. Like, you spent the 12th overall pick in the NFL draft on a quarterback. I'm just saying that most of the time, we would be much more critical of a 12th overall pick at the quarterback that at times looks like a liability. But we're sitting there saying, well, look at what Sean Payton's doing.
Sean Payton
yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, we are not this lenient on 7 games. Like, the benefit of the doubt we're given here because of Sean Payton.
Don't say we. You.
Some people are much more critical on quarterbacks 7 games in than we're being on Bo Nix.
Bo
Nix is not good.
Listen, boot camp Fitz. Calm down, okay? You're over here putting us in. We're not we. I'm not with you. We're 7 games into a season for the 12th pick, who probably, and even Peyton has admitted this, would he have potentially gone lower in that draft? Yeah, maybe. Would he, if they could have gotten cute and tried to maybe move back into the 20s or whatever, and that's where they get Bo Nix. It doesn't matter. He saw the guy he wanted, they took him, and you're 4-3. And he's had some, above average games, at least, you sit there and you look at the expanse of the 7 games. There have been a couple where you're like, okay, yeah, there's been some bad games, some horrible games. And then there are games like last night where you're like, Yeah, he didn't, he was okay. He was adequate. Like, he ran the ball a few times. That changes the dynamic that defenses have to prepare for. Again, you run for 225 yards. A lot of that is on the strength of the quarterback. He had one run. I can't remember off the top of my head how long it was, but it looked like he was going to the house. Like he was going to house like a 40-yard touchdown run. Yeah. So again, for 7 games of Bo Nix, it's fine. And when you compare it to what you were dealing with Russell Wilson, who couldn't even get plays off at times. And again, how much of that had to do with Nathaniel Hackett, but it's what he wants. It's the piece he needs to work with. You can see Peyton is happy right now as a head coach. And I'm fine with it. Like, what did we really expect of Denver coming into this? I did think the 5.5 Vegas number was ridiculous, by the way. And I did bring it to Peyton's attention, and he did bristle, at that number. And I think he was right to. Now, when I look at it, I'm like, yeah, he's right. When I look at his history coaching, he tends to keep teams off the mat. They don't always look great. They aren't always playoff teams, but they're not 5-12 dregs in NFL seasons, and I don't think this is either. And to me, again, this is a step forward as long as they feel like they've got the right quarterback and they're swapping out pieces. I would take Bo Nix over anybody on the Raiders quarterback depth chart.
Oh God!
Well, so would I. I mean, I would take Bo Nix over Aiden O'Connell. Like, that's not a hot take. Like,
by the way, real quick on Bo Nix. He's not really throwing to anybody either. Caleb Williams has all this help. I mean, at least Jaden Daniels has Terry McLaurin. Cortland Sutton's really not a number one, and Josh Reynolds, and they have nothing at tight end. And if you give him a Justin Jefferson, like Sam Darnold's getting, Justin Jefferson's very high on the totem pole, but give him a legit number one, I think he would look a lot better too.
That's a fair take.
Look, I'm also going to sit here and say, in succession, they've got at Baltimore, at Kansas City, Atlanta. Then they get the Raiders. That's fine. After that, they have the Chargers, who they just lost to. They have another game with Kansas City. They have a Cincinnati team that I'm not willing to say is just going to mail it in the rest of the team. There are losses left ahead of this.
Of course, we said 9 to 10 wins, Fitz. I mean, that means if we say 9 to 10 wins, if there's 9 wins, that means there's 5 losses left on the schedule, right? I mean, that's the way I looked at it. I'm like, okay, they're borderline 9-8. Maybe if they catch some breaks or get on a heater, they're 10-7, right? But where they're 4-3, that means there's a heck of a lot of losses left in front of them. I accept that. And again, I'm not expecting Denver to be this great revolutionary team right now. They're stuck in the AFC West, just like everyone else is stuck in the AFC West, dealing with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. No one else is getting out of that hole. And again, I'm not an apologist for them at all. I've criticized Sean Payton in the past for a multitude of different things. I just think what he was brought in there to do, he's doing. There's a calmness in the franchise that was not there before. I mean, prior to this summer, the few times I talked to anybody there, went through, it was like, oh my God, like, is Sean going to fire the GM? Who else is going to get canned? Is he going to just turn the entire roster upside down? Everything felt chaotic. Then you go back through last summer and it's like, wow, why is this calm like this? Like, I think I spent 30, 40 minutes with Peyton and he was as calm as I'd seen him in years. And I'm like, what is going on here? Now I can see it. He's just happy because he feels like he has a quarterback who he can work with and he doesn't have to juggle. That's a huge leap forward in this league once you actually get your offensive mind, who's not going anywhere, aligned with a young quarterback.
By the way, do you think Vance Joseph gets a job? I mean, I know it's a little early for that talk, but
a head coaching job?
Yeah, in interviews. No,
I mean, Mike,
they're starting to bubble
up.
Vance has done a heck of a job with that defense. I mean, from where they were last year, giving up 70 to the Miami, when you're like,
okay, you're going to take Vance over. Okay, do you think Brian Flores is getting a job because he should get a job before anybody?
I think he should get a job, but I don't think he will. Like, we all know the backside. That's just that's like a different bucket, right? Like, if you're talking about, like, let's take Flores out because I really, truly, at the end of the day, don't think NFL owners are going to give him a shot. If we're looking at that kind of rest of him, I think Vance is going to get some interviews.
He's doing
a great job.
He's done a very, very good job. And again, with other than Pat Surtain, when you look at that deep, no, I don't want to say that. There's some decent players.
They got some good parts. So they got one superstar and some good parts. They got, but Cody Barton last night comes out of nowhere and has a superstar game. Like, I think Vance has done a great job. I just don't know if, like, he had that one shot. I don't know if the stink of that, but he never really got a real chance there. Like, that was just kind of, he was set up to fail. I think she'll get some interviews. I think that the Vance is maybe learn from that experience and the Duke coach defense. I really respect what he's done with them since, again, they started last season so bad. They look like the worst defense in NFL history. To where they are right now, he's done a heck of a job.
I will just say to this moment of the pod, for whenever Broncos fans just light me up for being overly critical, I will remind everybody that when Sean Payton was hired, I said, I love the hire. I think long-term, the Broncos are in great hands. And I think the rebuild for a team usually takes 3 years. I'd even say that they're ahead of schedule with the way that defense is played. I believe in Sean Payton and the Broncos long-term. I do not believe in Bo Nix. I will stand on that. I will plant that flag. I do not think they have their quarterback of the future. And I don't care if they're winning games. So we'll see. It'll take a year to know who's right. But if I'm right, you know that I'm a child and I will actually remind everybody of this conversation over and over and over again.
Fitz, you haven't seen a good quarterback in a long time. I think maybe your optics are not.
No. I am an expert on quarterbacks. I know a bad quarterback when I see him.
Like, who's the quarterback of your life? Like, who's the Raiders quarterback of your lifetime where you're like, oh my God,
Gannon.
Gannon.
Rich Gannon.
I guess. Yeah, you had the Gannon years. Okay. I was going to say, you haven't had it. It's like Jeff Hostetler or something you're still pining for. But
I give you Jeff Hostetler and Jay Schrader. Like Jeff Hostetler and Jay Schrader at the same time.
I will tell you too, and I like Rich. I love Rich. Like, he's a great guy. I love him he does really good work on Sirius. He'll also tell you that if you ask him, he'll tell you, Tim Brown and Jerry Rice had a little something to do with it. Like, he's like, I had a couple pretty good players who were still cranking out,
Not untrue. But I remember him carving up the Broncos on a Monday night. Yeah, Gannon had a run. He had a good run. He's not Mark Wilson.
He did.
He
was
Todd Marinovich.
Mark Wilson. Yeah. What Todd Marinovich? What? I'm thinking strays all over the place. We're taking a break. I need a damn drink. It's too early in the morning. I'm gonna recalibrate myself. I'm gonna just remind myself that the future is bright because next year's quarter. Okay, I can't. I just can't. I can't even buy into next year. Look, speaking of the Raiders and trades, we all know that it's been a big week for wide receivers. When we come back, we'll figure out some other wide receivers that might be on the trade block. All right, I've calmed down. I've gone through this whole thing. I will tell you, boys, that Davante Adams being traded was not an easy week. Not an easy week. Never is an easy week. If they end up trading Max Crosby, that might be the moment that I just put everything in a little box and I just put it away and I die as a fan. It might be it for me. But we saw some big wide receiver trades this week. Obviously, the Bills and the Jets both make big moves. So we know there are other teams that are out there in the quarterback, or in the wide receiver market. C-Rob, you talked a little bit about this. Give me I want to start with DeAndre Hopkins because I just every week love to just destroy Will Levis. But if I'm being fair, I think the Titans did something this offseason that made a lot of sense. They invested all the way around and said, hey, let's figure out if we got the quarterback. Right. Now they know they don't have the quarterback. So knowing they don't have the quarterback, my thing is do you keep these invested pieces to hope that you can bring somebody in next year, or do you just cut bait?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good debate to have. And I think it's settled if, as you said, that's, it's true that they believe that, okay, they're out on Levis. And the Indianapolis game, when you watched that game, it felt like you could feel Brian Callahan was pulling the offense back a little bit from him. It felt a little simpler. They weren't, there were definitely ways where you felt like they were protecting him. And that's alarming. You're like, okay, that feels like if you're going into protection mode now with him and against a Colts defense, by the way, that you should have been able to. Yeah, you should have been able to roll points up on that.
No, I noticed the same thing, Charles. Yeah, I know. It's a good take. It's a really, really good take.
Yeah. I think if you're sitting there and you're saying, we're going to keep Hopkins, your reason for keeping Hopkins is to go, all right, let's keep a functional offense in place. And I think it would even go beyond Hopkins because I think they would get calls on maybe some other players as well. You're going to say, let's keep a functional offense in place in terms of the talent that we put out on the field. And let's assess Levis through the remainder of the year and then other offensive pieces as well. Let's just keep this talent base in place. And the rationale being, well, what are we really going to get out of DeAndre at this point? Which I think is a real question. Now, the one thing that I think the Titans have going for them is two teams that are absolutely squarely in the wide receiver hunting department are Pittsburgh and the Kansas City Chiefs. I talked to a multitude of people across the league, and they are telling you, like, these are the two. They're going to make a move. Nobody knows whether it's going to be a high level move. Nobody knows if it's a mid level move. But these are the two teams that are absolutely going to make a move by the trade deadline to go acquire a wide receiver. The thing about those two teams, and particularly for Pittsburgh, I think they want a veteran adult in the room kind of guy. Now,
Wonder why, Charles. Wonder why.
Right. Yeah. Jeez. They want somebody basically babysitting George Pickens. It feels like. Pickens, yeah. Right. Yeah. That's what it feels like.
It's like the old NBA thing where you got the guy on the end of the Juwan Howard on the end of the bench to keep track of all
put his locker next to get the veteran in, put his locker next to it.
Totally true.
But as much as you guys have covered the league, does that work? See, Rob, like in your mind, if you're bringing an adult in the room to try and, find a way to get through to Pickens, how often is that actually successful?
Well, particularly at the deadline, right? Like, I think that's something that you try to do before the season starts, right? You want a veteran there during the passing program, the workouts, the full squad minis, training camp. You want a very long period of time for someone to really make some kind of an impression there. This, though, I think part of it is it's not just babysitting George Pickens. And I hate to use that response, but, it's also putting someone in there who's dependable. I think like you're looking at like an Adam Thielen type who obviously not a star level player, but can be a guy who can give you 4, 5, 6 dependable catches a game. I think the Chiefs are also looking for, they would like a veteran, but I think the Chiefs at this point, they'll just take talent. Can they add talent? And I don't think they're going to worry if it's got some bumps or bruises or problems. But I think, focusing this back to DeAndre Hopkins, I think that is what could potentially give the Titans some options. I just don't know what that price will be. I don't think it's not going to be maybe a 4th round pick at this stage. Maybe, I don't even know if you would get a 4th that would graduate to a 3rd. And is it really worth it at this point for the Titans to move on from Hopkins? I think a couple other guys. Look, Tee Higgins, the Bengals are not going to pay another tag on him. I just do not see. It's going to be $26 million plus, especially if they're doing a Jamar Chase deal. If that gets done. Now, Joe Burrow can affect this. I could see them saying, hey, if we lose him, if we don't tag him, we lose him in the offseason. We're just not going to piss Burrow off at this point, particularly when the offense is clearly coming together with T there. But I do think it's a worthy call for teams to go, hey, you're not going to pay the tag on that guy next year. You're especially not going to pay Jamar Chase that extension and also a $26 million tag for T. We just don't see it. If the Bengals do it, they could potentially prove me wrong. I don't believe they will. Again, I brought up Adam Thielen. Who am I leaving out right now off the top of my head?
You had mentioned Cooper Kupp. Do you really think the Rams would trade him?
I'm telling you, I don't think Cooper Kupp is a Ram next year. So if he's not going to be a Ram next year, if he's going to be a cap casualty for you in the offseason, why would you not move him?
Yeah, I get it. It's just, it would be stunning. Like he has been such a big part of what McVay has
absolutely
done.
But look at look at the record, Frank.
I get it. I do get it, but it's like there's a few guys you're just like, I don't think they could pull the trigger to trade him. And I just with Kupp, it's like, again, he had maybe one of the greatest all-time seasons for any player in NFL history, and he helped them to the Super Bowl. Blah blah.
Frank, there's
but
health issues.
I totally get it. Yeah,
there's health issues. There's financial issues. There's the issue of your record. And by the way, I mean, they traded a corner, right? Ramsey. Everybody thought, oh, they'll never trade Ramsey, right? I mean, when Ramsey,
they'll make moves, they're not scared.
When it came time to pay Ramsey, they moved him, right? I mean,
what are they getting for Cooper Kupp in your mind? What's real?
I will bet you, even with the advanced age, I will bet you could probably. I bet you it might take some contingencies, but you could probably get a 3rd that graduates into a 2nd round pick for him with and not like a steep graduation. Like, not, hey, he's got to suit up for us in the Super Bowl, and like then Davante, we'll second you a second. Yeah, like Davante's a pretty steep 2nd round. Yeah. He's got to play in the AFC title game or the Super Bowl, or, well, I guess it obviously wouldn't be the
first
Super Bowl.
Team All-Pro or whatever.
Yeah, first team All-Pro or play in the AFC title game, whatever. So I think it would be a softer graduation scale than that to get it to a 2nd round pick. But I do think they could potentially get a 2nd rounder out of him from the right team, especially if that team feels like Adams. Like if you're the Jets, part of the attraction to bringing Adams is he was willing to restructure his deal and potentially open the door to being there in 2025. If you're an acquiring team with Cooper Kupp and you're saying, We'll get him the remainder of this season. We're square in the middle of our Super Bowl window. And we think we can work with him to make sure he comes back in 2025. That's worth it, I think.
And the Chiefs, like, right? Like, you're not trading him within the conference, and you're basically doing, if you're Sean McVay, you're doing right by one of your key players of your entire career. You say, hey, Cooper, go win another Super Bowl. And if you're the Chiefs, you're like, yeah, okay, we've given up a pick for, half a season Cooper Kupp, but whatever. We don't care about next. We care about three-peat right now. Let's go get it. That would be fun. I don't know,
Good
like,
God.
who knows? Wouldn't that be fun?
Oh my God.
Cooper
Oh
Kupp with Patrick Mahomes. If you get a healthy half season out of Cooper Kupp, oh my goodness! Like that would be so much fun.
We always hear
the
the teams, but we hear constantly teams are not going to help the Chiefs. Is that real? I mean, if you're the Rams, are you helping the Chiefs win a third Super Bowl in a row?
But they're not in the same. Like, it's not like Davante because it's the division and you hate them. I don't know do the Rams have any beef with the Chiefs? Not that I can think of. So it's like,
no.
Sean McVay doing right by Cooper Kupp, I think, would be setting him to the Chiefs.
I will say this: they wanted Nick Bolton. They took Tutu Atwell, and then the Chiefs took Bolton the next pick. I think that's maybe a beef. I think they're probably upset that they didn't take Nick Bolton there.
But that would be that fit just seems like so just jumping off the page. Like, hey, let's do right by everybody and let Cooper Kupp go and play with Patrick Mahomes. That would be freaking awesome.
Go back to Tee Higgins for a second. Doesn't it feel like trading T at this point would be sort of a disaster? I mean, if you're the Bengals, you could have gotten more for him before. You did nothing. You brought him back. Your team starts slow. Your offense is starting to click. And now you're basically saying, no, we're going to go get whatever we can left for this player. Like, the egg on the face for the Bengals for mishandling it just feels like that would be too much to bear.
I think, clearly I think dealing him in the offseason was the move. That was the time to do it. But I think it's a bigger disaster because you saw what the offense turned into when he was on the field healthy. All of a sudden you're like, whoa, now I see this is the Bengals offense I remember. Now, granted, the backfield has something to, Chase Brown suddenly becoming, like a poor man's version of a young Alvin Kamara is pretty amazing for the Bengals in that respect. So again, bringing up Tee Higgins, I want to underline this. And I swear to God, if you guys clip Tee Higgins and you leave this part out, I'm going to lose my mind. I'm telling you right now, Tee Higgins is the guy you make the call on. And basically just say to the Bengals, we don't think you're going to pay him. So let's have a realistic conversation about it. Now, the Bengals' response to that could be, we're not taking this guy from Burrow. We're not going to do it this year. And we still have some kind of optimism that we can figure something out and potentially extend him in the offseason. Or if we have to, we'll put the tag on him again and then deal him next offseason. So I think it's more the disaster is taking him away from Burrow at this point. I think if you're Burrow, you'd be pissed because you go, okay, well, you're cashing us out of this season for sure. And you're basically waving the white flag on trying to keep together this tandem of wide receivers. And I'm looking elsewhere. And somehow I see other teams that have kept together expensive tandems. Devonta Smith and AJ Brown are both in Philly. Why can't we figure out how to keep two high level guys that could both be number ones?
The one thing in the back of my mind, though, is Jermaine Burton. I think that guy's going to be really good.
Yeah,
I think that they drafted him. I think that if you're going to sell something to Burrow, you're going to be like, hey, all right, we get it. Like, T's awesome. But we have a guy who's making 1/25th of what Tee Higgins is going to make, and he's going to be a star for you, too. Let's let this thing play out.
I had a buddy, I think we all have a buddy that's like a solid 4 on a scale of 1 to 10 that doesn't understand they're a solid 4 and they'll walk up fearlessly to anybody. And I'll never forget standing in a bar with him when he decided, like, there was a supermodel level beautiful girl at the bar and he decided he was going to make his run up. So he walked up to try and buy her a drink and he didn't even get a word out of his mouth before she just turned around. She saw him coming. She said, nope. And he just turned back around and he walked back to us. That's what I imagine the phone call is like for most teams. You call the Bengals, you're like, so wanted to talk to you about T. Nope. And then they just hang up the phone. Because anything less than that, see, Rob, everything you're saying makes a ton of sense. And you are so right about all of it. Okay. I just have a hard time stacking the blocks today.
I mean, you have to roll up with the Rolex and the big fat wad of cash. And you go, oh, my Ferrari keys, I dropped them on the floor.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And by the way, stop bringing up solid 4s because if you add Frank and I up, we're probably not a solid 4 together.
I think I'm the 3 and you're the 1. Is that it? No, can I take that?
You're both beautiful to me. You're both beautiful.
It's like what if you don't. If you don't, it's the card. Right, it's the whole card analogy. Like if you don't know who the sucker at the table is, it's you. If you don't know, if you don't know who the solid four is in your friend group, it's probably you.
No truer words. Let's get one more in that we haven't talked about that is interesting based on the Davante trade. Mike Williams with the Jets got to be sitting around trying to figure out what his role is like. So I guess what's the market for Mike?
A song, a ham sandwich.
Yeah,
I mean, you want him? Come get him, boys. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Pay some of his salary.
Yeah, that's all you need to do.
We just need you to take him and pay the rest of his money. That's it.
And it just looks like a very small sample, but it looks like he's had so many injuries. Like it just, I don't know that I'd be investing in Mike Williams at this point. Let's put it that way.
Well, he was an older player when he entered the league, right?
Yeah, and I get why they got him, and I get everything. And it just didn't work out. It just did not work out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's it. There's nothing. There's like Fitz is waiting for the big. No, Fitz, that's it. Like Fitz, if you want to acquire him for the podcast, they would probably trade him to Yahoo.
That's amazing. Mike Williams will be on next week's Inside Coverage. No, he won't. I'm kidding. We'll see how that goes. All right,
Frank, you ready to suit up for the Jets?
Yeah, right. I might get some run. I could kick for them, maybe. Who knows?
Frank, I don't think you can kick for him. You don't seem your legs don't seem bendy enough to be a kicker. I want that for you, but all right, there we go.
That was always a problem. Yeah.
All right, we
Stop
have Drake
talking
Maye.
about Frank's legs.
It's impossible. How can you not talk about Frank's legs on the show? We had a first performance for Drake Maye and the quarterback stock exchange. We'll get into all of it when we come back. C-Rob, you mentioned it earlier. 3 touchdowns. I mean, some picks in there too, but I thought the Drake Maye thing was going to be a disaster because the Patriots are just awful. And, shockingly, I thought he handled the awfulness around him pretty well.
Yeah, he did. I mean, look, he had, there are the 3 turnovers. He had a strip sack fumble, right? Not great. One of the 2 interceptions was so weird. I still, if you watch it, it's like in the left flat. I still can't understand how the Texans player who literally was manned up, had somebody in his face and picks this thing off by just sticking his left hand out. It was the weirdest, craziest interception I've seen. But yeah, I think what was crazy to me was the offense. It came alive. They moved the ball, and now you still get blown out by the Texans. But when I went back and I looked at, what Jacoby Brissett had done in week 5 versus the Dolphins versus what Drake Maye did against the Texans in week 6, it's apples and oranges comparison because look, the defenses aren't the same. The personnel is not the same, all these different things. But I do think the routes, the accessibility of the routes, it was very interesting to me. I think you saw Drake Maye went 9 of 9 on out routes, right? Which is what you're accessing your arm strength. You want to show that you have the ability to have accuracy. He threw a touchdown on an out route. They only ran 1 post with him, which I think again goes into, you don't want to have him back there. Hey, posts take time to develop, but it was a 40-yard touchdown to Keyshawn Boutte, right? And then the touchdown pass to who was it? Demario
Douglas?
Yeah, it was Demario Douglas. Yeah, it was a slant, Douglas, right? And not only that, it was a slant where he hit him so perfectly in stride that he left an entire half of the field for Douglas to work with. Kick in the speed, the touchdown. I think hitting him in stride is what created that touchdown. So when I watched it, I'm like, okay, part of the reason for this change, now looking back on it, I think we know there were some people on that offense that wanted to see the change happen because they thought Drake Maye can get this ball to the receivers a little more effectively. Maybe there's certain talents that he has that Jacoby Brissett does not necessarily have. And I think you saw it right away. You saw his ability to use his arm strength and some accuracy to hit guys in spaces that allowed them to work. The 40-yard touchdown to Boutte was amazing. It was perfect. Yeah, I mean, he threw some perfect passes in this game. Now, there was a lot of downside too. And you could see like first down in that offense, and we'll see if that changes. They're like, we're not having this dude throw. Like, we're going to run it on first down as much as we possibly can. There's a lot of protection that went into how that entire plan was dialed up. But for one game out, I was like, okay, I can see it. I see the upside here, and I can see why they leaned into it. Let's see if this carries through. The one caveat I will give you, and I swear, Patriots fans, don't lose your minds. I'm reminding everyone. I'm reminding everyone here to be calm. I remember after Will Levis's first game in the NFL, I was like, oh, okay. I see the upside here. I see some of this talent. I see this ceiling that we can be excited about. The only reason I bring that up is there's a ton of work left here, which I think everybody knows, and be prepared for some downside with Drake Maye as well.
See, I think this was awesome because it fits into this whole the class. I mean, I said Jaden Daniels is going to be the story of the NFL season, and really it might end up being the top 2 guys or the top 3 guys, and we need this in the NFL. Look, that Trevor Lawrence draft class pretty much all washed out, right? And yeah, Stroud hit last year, but Bryce Young didn't, and we need an injection of youth and superstars at the quarterback position. Now you got Caleb Williams balling out right now. Like, he has taken leaps and leaps and leaps every week. He looks better and better and better. Jaden Daniels has just been a superstar since day one. If Drake Maye is a star too, and Bo Nix is viable, and we don't even know what to make of Penix and McCarthy yet because one isn't going to play, one's injured. Like, this could be the class where we're looking 10 years from now saying they kind of revitalized the NFL.
So, Frank, we're talking about 6 guys, right? And right now, the 4 that have played, all 4 of them, we're like, okay, and we can. There's
to various degrees, yes.
Yeah, to various degrees. There's clearly a pecking order, right? I would put Jaden Daniels at 1. I would put Caleb Williams at 1A. Like with how Caleb's gotten it together.
Sure. That's very fair.
Yeah. I mean, those 2 are. It's like 1 and 1A, right? I think Drake Maye, what he showed coming out, I'm like, okay, that to me, I'd put him squarely at 3. And then Nick's at 4, but again, saying, okay, Nick's is what he is, but we can see, what Sean Payton likes about him. As you said, McCarthy, prior to that injury in the preseason, McCarthy all of a sudden had this hot ass, like, he kind of lit up, and you're like, whoa, wait, they got a dude like this. Like, he's showcasing things.
Same with Penix. Penix looked good in the preseason.
Penix is fantastic, and he's sitting there just learning. He's doing he's on the timeline they want. So even if half these guys hit, right, 3 out of 6 is great, right? But it might end up being, as you said, more than 3 out of 6.
Well, it might be 5 or 6, 6 or 6. Who knows?
I do want to bring up one thing about Jaden Daniels because I just saw it this week. Troy Aikman was on what's it? Pardon My Take. Is that the podcast? The PFT podcast. Sure. So I'm watching it, and Troy Aikman, who does not give praise, like, he's such a pain in the ass with play. Like, he just will. You really have to be something to get some serious praise out of Troy Aikman. Most of the time, he's going to be pretty critical, or you'll have already gotten your flowers everywhere else by the time he gives them to him. He was talking about Jaden Daniels in like such glowing terms. I was stunned. Like, I couldn't believe it. Like, he was just like, I think they had called a game at one of Washington's games. By the time he got to the show or whatever, but he was effusive about the talent of Jaden Daniels, the leadership abilities, like all these different things. I'm like, oh my God, man, like, this is really, because, at some point, don't we think like we're getting over our skis? Like, doesn't it feel that way? Like, man,
it does. Like, you're like, how could all of these guys be stars? How could Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams both be future MVPs? Like, it never happens that way. That's why.
But I think you got to let each one be individually. Like, we can't look at previous draft class failures as a reason this draft class will fail. And see, Rob, I go back to something we talked about when we were getting ready for the NFL draft. Look, there were plenty of teams that were aggressively trying to move up in the draft. Yeah. And they just weren't having those calls returned. And so for all of the conversation fans were having at the time of like, you got to trade up and trade for Jaden Daniels. Well, you can't make Washington trade the pick. You can't make New England trade the pick. And we talked about that at the time. I think fans are now seeing why teams were dug in, because these quarterbacks across, like, whatever your favorite flavor of ice cream was, each of them looked like great ice cream. And now,
and Fitz, here's the thing too, and I'll bring up the Raiders. I was talking to someone, it was during the Davante Adams stuff, and someone kind of wrapped up all in the middle of this, right? And I won't say which franchise it was. I'll just say it was either the Jets or the Raiders. The observation that was made in this conversation was the year to get your quarterback was 2024. Like, this was the year to get, like, if you are going to need a quarterback, that's the year to get your quarterback. And now, 2025, the teams, as you said, Fitz, this idea of like clawing and trying to trade up and get your guy, we're going to figure that out, I think, in 2025, because this class in 2025, I think you could argue 5/6 of this class would have gone ahead of every single quarterback in the next class, in the 2025 class. Like maybe Nix is the one that wouldn't, but I can tell you, I think Penix might go in front of all those guys next year. Penix might have been the first pick, the first quarterback to come off the board if you were coming out in 2025 instead of 2024.
Which is part of why, when you look at Atlanta's decision to draft him, I mean, we all talked about why that seemed controversial at the time, but what you're saying, C-Rob, is so important. Like, teams scout the quarterback position for multiple years at once.
2 years.
To try and figure out.
2 year increments. You always scout in 2 year increments. You have to know the 2 year window, because it's like, if we don't get him now, can we get him next year? You always have to know that.
And that's why, you heard that home run offers were being made out there. Washington says no, and home run offers being made to the Patriots, and they say no. Well, I don't fault the team for saying no. I don't fault the teams for trying to make the home run offers. I think now you're going to have a bunch of teams that need a quarterback in this year's draft. We've talked about the Raiders, possibly the Saints. You can go up and down the list on teams that might be looking to rebuild at that position, and they're going to quickly find out that ain't much there. Like that. It's a wild world, and part of that is because last year's class was just that's special. I know we overreact to everything, but this class feels like it's worth overreacting to. It's too early to say this is 1984 all over again, but it is not too early to say that this is the best draft class at quarterback. It feels like we've seen after 1 year in years.
Yep. Sam Darnold's going to be a Raider.
Sammy.
But that's the interesting, like, other side of this conversation too, is like, if you can't get a quarterback maybe next year, you got to get your quarterback somewhere, right? So now you start looking around the league going, okay, well, what's the availability of different guys? What veteran is, but what about Fields and Russell Wilson, right? All of a sudden, Russ is, hey, it's a thing again. One of those guys is going to, Russ is back and maybe Fields isn't, and I can tell you this, if Russ starts the rest of the season, I don't think Justin Fields is staying there. He ain't coming back. He's going to sign somewhere else. So that's a guy you're thinking about. Maybe Sam Darnold, if Minnesota says, hey, he's on the deal he's on. He's a free agent. We're sticking with JJ McCarthy. So there's going to be some other
Stafford
quarterbacks
could be part of that musical chairs if things go that way. This was year to get your quarterback for sure.
Do we feel like Bryce Young is on the trading block or about to be playing somewhere else?
So they're in a tough spot here. I think Carolina's in a tough spot because Andy Dalton, he's running the offense adequately. He's not playing bad, right? He's not playing great, but he's not playing poorly either. Like he is an adequate guy right now as a starting quarterback. And I think if you're the Panthers, you're sitting there, and the conundrum that you have is we're going to become mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. It's probably going to come in the next few weeks. And then at that point, we have to go, what do we do now? Like, if we make the change back to Bryce, it's to measure Bryce and figure out, do we have something? Or maybe we can generate some additional interest in him if he goes out there and plays solid and looks like he just needed to be sat down. Maybe even if he comes out and he looks okay, he's still not our guy. I mean, maybe we still want to deal him, but let's showcase him a bit for teams who all they know about him is the horrible film that he put out earlier this year. But you're also sending a message, though, to the rest of the Panthers offense. Like, Jonathan Brooks, right, is going to come back. He's going to factor in at running back as your rookie. You want to get a good, honest look at him. You want the offensive line to be a cohesive unit by the end of this season. You want some of those, Xavier Legette, Mingo. There's a multitude of other players. Your Jatavian Sanders. Let's figure out what we have with these guys. You can probably better do that with an adequate quarterback than putting another guy back in there. Unless Bryce has turned it all around as he sat and watched, you can probably better do that with an adequate quarterback. Not good, not terrible, just the guy. Then you can plugging in a young guy and watching him struggle again. You could take a lot of steps back. So I just don't know how you make that decision. And my guess is practice will play into that, but more than anything else, David Tepper will play into that.
All right, so let's look at, you have stock up, stock down with the quarterback stock exchange as always. Thought it was interesting. Stock up on Brock Purdy. Are we I've already been high on Brock Purdy, that, but have all the Brock Purdy questions just been answered? Can we stop asking Brock Purdy questions or no?
Frank.
I knew that was coming, guy. I knew that was coming. I will stick with this. I don't think the 49ers win a championship with Brock Purdy making $55 million a year. I'm going to stick with that. I'm just going to stick with it. But he's played great. He's been very, very good this year. He's a good quarterback. I get that. Yes, I understand. I just don't.
Well, Frank,
I think that
you really need to get used to whether or not they're going to win one with him making $60 million a year.
Yeah,
I know.
That's the thing. Yeah.
Okay?
He's already jumped to 60. Yeah, and I still think the answer is no, but we'll see. Like, hey, he's going to get paid. There's no question about it. He has played well in the face of adversity with a lot of injuries around him. He's taken his game. I think he's played much better this year than he did last year. Even. And when he was great last year, like you look at his numbers, and it was like he had a serious MVP case that got looked over. I think he's developed as a player this year. The numbers might not be quite as great, but they're very, very good.
Listen,
and I think he's made strides as a player. But I still don't think he should get. I still don't think you win a championship with $60 million.
George Kittle put this best, okay, I'm done with the Brock Purdy argument because I think Kittle, to me, he wrapped it up. Kittle said, I think it was some point in the last week, he basically was like, look, it's a goalpost thing with Brock. Like, we keep moving the goalposts. We're like, he can't do this. And then he goes out and he does it. Then we're like, oh, but he can't do that. And then he goes and does this other thing. And then when he does this other thing, it's, well, geez. I mean, look at all the surrounding talent that you have. It's because all the surrounding talent. This guy, Debo makes that offense, or Christian McCaffrey makes that offense, or George Kittle makes that offense. And then all those guys at some point go down. And he still continues to play at a pretty high level, right? Is he going to be better with all the stars out there? Of course he is. But can he continue to play at a high level when some of those stars go down? He's shown that. So at this stage, I'm fine. I'm done with that. To me, the reason why I said stock up is I'm like, he has answered every single question he can. He has the full confidence of the coach in the front office. He has the full confidence of all the players, right? He's going to get 60 million. Like it's over. Like unless if there's a catastrophic injury or he does something he has not done up until this point in his career, which is just to slam into a wall and completely, fall apart as a player. He's gotten to that point where he's going to be the highest paid player in football when he signs that contract extension, unless he decides, I don't want to be the highest paid player in football. I am fine taking less money to try and keep the band together with all these other players, which he may ultimately decide to do. He might say, I was the last pick in the draft. You know what, man? This is all house money, 50, and this give me 50. I'm cool at 50.
Or he might turn around and say, I've been playing for a discount for a minute, y'all. Like, I'll get mine. Like,
900,000.
Like Dak, that's the thing. Remember all those years Dak played on a discount? Oh, that one. That dude was like, never again.
Never again.
That's a perfect segue though, because you got stocked down on Dak, and look, the Cowboys, they're bad right now. And I don't know how you fix that. I don't know how you fix the Cowboys being a bad football team right now. And Dak, stock down on Dak, I understand. But if I'm Dallas, I'm looking in the mirror saying, what is this season lost?
Oh, man. I mean, the thing about Dak is that Detroit game, and I do think some of this is the receivers. I don't think they have CD and nobody else. And then
nobody.
Aikman comes out and just absolutely rips the living hell out of their wide receivers, including he even criticized CD.
Lamb. Yeah,
and said, look, these guys aren't running great routes. Like, he brought up Lamb specifically. Like, he straight up went for the jugular and was like, here's, some of these problems. And I do think some of that was to, I don't want to say take heat off of Dak, but try to focus it on a broader picture than, what the hell is going on with Dak. But what I don't understand with Dak, what bothers me is, these blowout games, he does have a penchant at times, and we can say, oh, it's the surrounding pieces, it's the receivers, oh, the line didn't protect well, or they couldn't run the football. There are times where he will just disappear as a quarterback. Like, he will not have the traction you expect from that level of a player to go, we're going to just keep, we're going to battle our way out of this. I mean, the Detroit game, I was just like, what the hell just happened here? Like,
Fitz talked about that. There was no fight. There was no fight.
None.
Like, there was just like, they never punched back. Yep. Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
And that's what scares me.
I don't know what's going on with Dak. I don't think any less of him as a player. I think he's a heck of a football player.
I do too.
I think he's right below, like just below that elite tier guys. But yes, there's some times when they get behind, and it's just like, it's quicksand for him, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And you're like, why can't he? Did bring him back against the Ravens, I guess. He had a great fourth quarter there, but a lot of times when he's blowout, you're right. A lot of times he's blowout games, the playoffs last year, whatever. You're like, they're just not going to make a move, huh? They're not going to punch back. And a lot of that has been on Dak in these games. But overall, I think he's going to be fine. I still think the Cowboys have it in them to be an okay team, but man, it is just so disjointed right now with them in a lot of different ways.
I don't understand what's going on at home. Like what the hell?
Yeah, that's a weirdest
You can't win
split
at home
there
all of a
is.
sudden.
Like,
yeah.
And you look back at like the Saints game, and we're all like, oh wow, the Saints are really the Saints are terrible and he got blown out by them. Like, what? Like, oh my goodness.
No, look at their wins. I mean, they beat Cleveland. Like, okay.
I know. And the Giants, like, you're like, oh, like, I guess maybe they're just bad, but it's hard for me to look at that team, as me and Fitz and you talked about all off season. It's 12 wins, like clockwork. Like, this was a metronome. And all of a sudden, it's like, wow, this team's going to win 5? Like they look that bad, like, especially on defense. Like, their defense is really not good.
When you're getting to the point where Jerry Jones is, like, threatening to fire the radio guys,
dude,
right? Like basically, like, just straight up telling them you're replaceable. I can get someone else in here.
Someone else asking questions.
You are on another level, because that and that'll tell you something, because he's good for one of those every once in a while. We'll say that, like, every once in a while he'll get a burr in the saddle and really kind of flip out in a weird way. But it's usually not public. It's usually private. You usually hear these stories, like I'll tell you, there's a prominent writer, a prominent person who covers that team who like told me a story, like, straight up about, like, Jerry trying to get them fired. Like, was like, basically like, you're going to be fired. And then apologized for it later, like, came back later, was like, I was wrong, but this all happened privately. So for this to happen publicly on his own radio station, that's a stunner. And to me, I'm like, wow, that's okay. We're seeing some major cracks here in terms of where they are going forward and the pressure that's applied. Like, there's no way I listen to that interview if I'm Mike McCarthy and process that any way but going down. I'm in some trouble here. Like, this is not good.
I thought the same thing.
Yeah, and by the way, as somebody that put fairly substantial bet on the over win total for the Cowboys when it was low this year, the one thing I'd say is I know the offense is one-dimensional, but it's been one-dimensional every year. I know they don't have a running back, but they haven't had a running back. Like, the fall off this year from the Cowboys, I think, has been pretty stunning.
Frank, what was the over? Wait, what was the over? I need to know what the over.
I got it at 9.5. I got it at 9.5. So all they had to do was win 10 games, and I was like, they're going to win 10 games, and now I'm like, boy, I could have spent that money doing a lot more fun things.
No, I don't. That's the thing. When I look at them and you think about, like, a playoff perspective, I'm like, okay, I don't know. Washington might be better than them in the division. Philadelphia certainly has the ability to be better, but Philadelphia's got its own brand of problems. Yeah, the entire NFC North, I would take over the Cowboys right now.
Yes.
The NFC South, I'd probably take Tampa and Atlanta.
Teams, yeah.
Right? Like, so you're like, what the hell's happened here? Like,
49ers,
this is,
for sure.
And the NFC West, the 49ers, and for sure.
The hole that they're going to, like, the Cowboys' hole here is in part the rest of the NFC is winning games. I know that they're 3-3. There's plenty of football left, but 3-3 in the AFC feels much different in the wild card conversation than 3-3 does and will in the NFC. Like, there's just too many teams winning too many games that are actually good. So,
well, the good thing they have is the NFC North will start to beat up on itself, right? Like, those guys, they're all going to run into each other. So everybody, you can't have. I mean, we'll see, but it's not going to be one of those divisions where you're like, well, they're going to get all 4 teams into the playoffs.
The math is so hard.
It's so hard. Yeah.
They haven't played one game against each other yet. Like, I can't remember any interdivisional game yet between any of them.
No.
I guess the Packers played the Vikings.
Oh, that's right. The Packers did play the Vikings. That's right.
Vikings blew them out. That's about it.
All right, Frank, as we wrap up stupid underdog pick, you are now at -10.5. I'm at -6. We're not doing well on this. I went
big. This is a great segment.
Yeah, went big. You
got an underdog pick
Thursday.
I just want to talk about my Thursday night record this year.
Why don't we turn all the equipment off and finish the segment that way?
Let's see if we can get off this night here. Frank, what's your underdog pick? You got one for me?
I do. I'm going to go back to the Monday night well. I think the Buccaneers are the most undervalued team in the NFL right now. If you look at the totality of their season, they blew out the Commanders. Like, all of a sudden, we're like, ooh, that's actually a pretty good win. For what it's worth, they did blow out the Cowboys. They lost to the Broncos when their defense was playing really, really good, and they gave away a game against the Falcons. I think the Buccaneers are good. Like legitimately a very good football team. They're getting 3.5 points at home against the Ravens, who are also fantastic. Don't get me wrong. Ravens are really good. But I think the Buccaneers, after Monday night, we're going to be talking about, we've been kind of sleeping on how good Tampa Bay is. I like a lot of what they do. I think the Buccaneers went straight up against the Ravens on Monday night.
Okay. Wow. I like that pick a lot. I'm swinging for the fences again because it's early and I got plenty of time to make up ground. Look, it didn't work for me last week. It'll work for me this week.
Love this gambling mentality.
The Jags defense is trash. The Jags pass defense is trash, and the Jags have given up. I think Jags are done. I think we get the upset of the week. New England going to Jacksonville. The Jags are favored by 6. So I'm picking up 6 points when the Patriots do the unthinkable. There we go.
Doug Peterson just doesn't make it home, right?
Yeah,
Like,
Doug Peterson gets fired.
Yeah, there's
if
no way.
they lose to the Patriots, that's it.
No way. No, there's no way.
Wow. I can see
content.
it, though. I can understand where you're
content.
coming from. If you're just full fade on the Jaguars, I get it. That defense is horrible. Like, unbelievably bad. So I get it. I understand.
Listen, and I'll do you one better. I mean, it might not be coming out of that game, but I just don't see how Trent Baalke survives either as general manager, into next year. I think it's a clean sweep.
Yeah, it just is so ugly for the Jaguars. By the way, talking about bad over-unders, I do have a Jaguars over 8.5. Like, anybody want to buy that? I'll sell that. I'll sell that.
Yeah.
You know.
You have a Jaguars. You have a Jaguars over 8.5.
Over. Yeah. I'll sell it 50% off. Like, anybody want it? I'm here.
If you find a buyer for that, I'll throw in the Cowboys for a little bit too. Like, there we go.
What was the line from The Big Short where he's like, "I'm standing in front of a house on fire and I'm offering you fire insurance." Frank is standing in front of a house on fire and he's offering you 50% off the house.
That's amazing. Shout out to Emmy and Stone behind the scenes, always doing God's work. Follow us on social media. You know it, at Charles Robinson, at Yahoo Schwab, at Jason Fitz. That's where we are. We'll be back Sunday night recapping the week. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends, your family, enemies. Tell everybody to hang out with us for every single episode. We appreciate you listening. Hopefully your gambling is doing better than mine because, I'm just going to be living in a cardboard box of this, right? Thanks for hanging out with us.